Despite a career game from both Jalen Carter and Dallas Goedert, the Eagles left New Orleans with some major injuries that today don't seem to be getting much better, putting even more pressure on one wide receiver to perform next week. Plus, Nick Sirianni continues to try and defend his horrible play calling in really the worst way possible. Micah Parsons runs his mouth at the Birds following another defensive disaster, and the unsung heroes of the Eagles' big win, they're finally getting their praise. I'm Thomas Mott. This is The Thomas Mott Show. Well, after a relatively pretty healthy training camp period, the injury bug, it's starting to take its toll, with the Birds confirming late yesterday that wide receiver Britain Covey has now suffered a broken bone in his shoulder and will be heading to IR to be out at least the next 6 weeks. Pair this with the update last night from Janice Rollins, who said, quote, "The Eagles are preparing to be without both DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown for their Week 4 game in Tampa Bay, sources tell me." And suddenly, that Birds' loaded wide receiver room, it's looking completely decimated just 3 weeks in. Which means it's Jahan Dotson's time, again for the, third week now, to actually step up and show he's worth the third-round draft pick we spent to acquire him, really, for this exact scenario. Because right now, your wide receiver combination for Sunday versus the Bucs is going to be Campbell, Dotson, and Johnny Wilson, who combined have, wait for it, 6 catches for 36 yards so far this season. But that's not stopping Kellen Moore, who spoke today to the media, from at least trying to convince us they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, excellent job. Again, a really cool example of guys being able to play adjustment football. Those guys, ran around. They probably ran a few plays that they really have never ran necessarily, other than watching other guys run them in a number of weeks. And so for them to be able to hop in there and play those adjustments and line up in the different positions that they probably didn't anticipate lining up in, and being able to execute those plays towards the end, Jahan, handling some of those mesh plays really, really well and doing a great job with those. Like, that's an awesome example. That was Smitty earlier in the game. Now all of a sudden Jahan's in there and he's able to execute at a really high level. And so, we feel really confident and comfortable with those guys, especially, you give them a few extra days and they can kind of continue to develop and handle all the different adjustments through a game plan. And so we feel very fortunate to have those guys.
Now, of course, just an hour after Kellen Moore said, yeah, we like who we have, well, Philadelphia went out and re-signed John Ross, who, if you remember, was signed to the Eagles' original 90-man roster during training camp and didn't make the final cuts, also didn't make the practice squad, but Eagles need bodies, and so now John Ross is back. And I think when the Birds originally signed Ross and brought him in for minicamp and training camp, he had a pretty good chance to make the roster, but Paris Campbell came in, Johnny Wilson emerged, and the wide receiver room just got a little too crowded. It's a guarantee Ross will be elevated and play on Sunday. Will he actually make a difference? That remains to be seen, but just know the Eagles are really, really thin at wide receiver. Now, as far as that hit that knocked out one of our star wide receivers, DeVonta Smith, this one that gave him the concussion, Saints defensive lineman Christian Boyd posted on his IG yesterday that he would never deliberately try and give someone a serious injury while also wishing DeVonta Smith well, which I guess is nice to hear, but a little hard to believe when you watch the replay over and over again, plus add in the fact the Saints player was spitting on Smitty while he was on the ground, plus add in the end zone camera angle of Darius Slay getting dangerously blocked 5 yards out of bounds and somehow avoiding major injury, and this whole idea of the Saints not trying to be dirty is falling on deaf ears. Like, how am I supposed to believe Saints head coach Dennis Allen when he said, quote, "I'd say our guys play extremely hard and we're going to compete until the down is over"? I don't think we play dirty. I don't think we ever play dirty. It's not the way we coach it, not the way we teach it, but we do play hard. Give me your thoughts on the Saints playing hard versus actually playing dirty. Curious where you guys are at down below right now. Oh, and also the winner of the Clear Vision DeVonta Smith signed softball giveaway from yesterday's show. That's officially MRMK1GTI. So there's your winner. Go to below my description box. Send me an email. Show me it's you. Prove it. It's all down below, and I'll get that sent out to you ASAP. Now, the other major injury was, of course, Lane Johnson, who was reportedly seen thrown up on the sideline following his concussion, which I think officially happened on this play where Saquon accidentally collides with Johnson's head. Again, no update yet. It's way too early in the week. Concussion protocol takes a couple of days, but big time prayers up for all of the Birds hurting right now to hopefully be better sooner rather than later. Now, all these injuries and dirty plays, in my opinion, at least has me wondering why everyone was so up in arms about Jalen Carter's quote-unquote antics at the end of the game versus the Saints. Like, are we suddenly upset that the Birds finally have a defensive player who, A, seems fired up, B, excited about a big win, and C, trying to defend his guys? Like, Carter went from being completely irrelevant versus the Falcons last week to easily the best player on the entire field for the Birds, with Football Scout saying that Carter had, quote, the greatest game I've ever seen from a defensive tackle versus the Saints. He impacted 18 total plays in 51 snaps. I've never seen a D tackle have that high of a rate when it comes to his impact on a game. Absolutely incredible game, but one of the best IDLs in the NFL. And honestly, the film speaks for itself. Like, watching this stuff, Carter was an absolute menace. Just listen to Brian Baldinger break down what he saw from the bread man on Sunday afternoon.
Great defensive performances by the Eagles, keeping this Saints team to 12 points. But this man, Jalen Carter, was absolutely dominant. A lot of late stemmings, like his ability just to win and to beat one-on-ones all day long. So you watch him inside right here. Watch what he does to Trevor Penny. Like, he knocks him 3 yards in the backfield and watch him get off. Like, stack instead all day long. And then watch this. Little swat. And then we're not done. There's another swat. Bam. Another swat pass. Swat. Jalen Carter. Then you get this. These plays don't make the stat page, all right? Nothing about this makes the stat page, but he makes the play, all right? You watch him just get off the block right here. What's Derek Carr going to do when Jalen Carter's like, he's going to throw the ball into the dirt like he does, all right? Affects that throw. Watch this twist stunt right here, an exit stunt, and here he comes. A little swat right there again. Then you get this. Lucas Patrick came in for Eric McCoy at center. He has no shot of stopping Jalen Carter. No shot. Like, you can't cut him off. Gets off the block, down goes Kamara. Shut this offense down almost single-handedly. And then another third down stop. All right? 2 third down stops right here. 3rd and 3, they're going to run Kamara. Right? Here he comes off right tackle. Watch Jalen Carter. Watch him get rid of the guard right here and make the play. Like, classic, textbook. One textbook play after another. It's hard to complete passes. I don't care what the name of the back of the jersey is. If your diaphragm is getting smashed by Jalen Carter, because here it comes. And Derek Carr is throwing this ball. I don't know where it's going. I think Slay is all over this down the field. They shut Shaheed down the whole game. And then he went through men and he went around men. Didn't matter. Like, here it is. Like that escape, and down goes Kamara. Like, Jalen Carter was the most dominant defensive player on this field. And there was a lot of great defensive players on the field. But that man was the best all game long.
Throwing a 93.5 PFF grade in Week 3 for Carter, which was first among interior defenders, and hopefully this is a preview of what you're going to get from him the rest of the season. And if it is, he's probably going to be considered very much so in play for Defensive Player of the Year. Oh, and also as DC Vic Fangio, he spoke today and thinks, yeah, Carter looked great, and he should be like that going forward.
Yeah, he obviously, this past game was his best game by far, and hopefully that will set the trend moving forward. I don't know what actually triggered it other than, we as a D-line unit didn't play good in the previous game, so I'm sure that had something to do with it.
With a player like that who is so talented, what's the key to making sure that he's consistent with it?
Just keeping him on point on a day-in, day-out basis, not just game day, but practice also. Because, the way you practice usually is the way you'll play.
Now, as for Bryce Huff, his defensive snaps, guess what, were nearly cut in half from last week. Not a good sign. Yet again, he had 0 pressure, 0 sacks, 0 quarterback hits on Sunday. Like, just copy, paste, rinse, repeat. He's just been absolutely terrible. But hey, at least there's film here of him setting the edge on run support. Like, I guess that's a positive. Either way, Fangio was asked about this and gave, honestly, a pretty non-committal answer on Huff's role going forward.
What's the plan going forward with Bryce?
Much the same as it's been. He'll be mixed in there just along with the rest of the guys. We got five guys dressed. We're mixing 4 of them, and it's been pretty much be the same, I think.
Now, with Slay being out, following again that cheap shot you see here, we got to see Ringo in coverage instead of Isaiah Rodgers, which is a theme that continues to absolutely blow my mind as to how both Rodgers and I guess Devin White can be starters in training camp and then not see the field at all despite injuries the first 3 weeks. And Fangio's answer when asked about this very battle was really confusing and honestly pretty strange.
No, it was just Keely was up and ready to go for the game because if we had played any 6 DBs, he would have been in there. We just thought the guys on the sideline, he was more into it and ready to go and spur of the moment thing. And if this had happened earlier in the game and there's still a lot of football to play, probably would have seen Isaiah out there.
what? So Rodgers wasn't into the game? He didn't seem ready to go into the game? It's just such a weird situation. Can we at least give Isaiah Rodgers a chance to prove he's either A, good, or B, bad? Like, it doesn't seem to be that difficult, and yet here we are today. Of course, the defensive line wasn't the only impressive part of the Birds' win. How about the offensive line? The backups coming in on the right side and performing extremely well in Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson. With multiple stunts, watch this, being handled nearly perfectly, while also helping to create those critical big running lanes for Barkley late. And you can tell just how much this means to someone like Fred Johnson, who nearly quit football before kind of doing a last chance signing with the Eagles to maybe get better under Jeff Stoutland. And boy, listen to the soundbite of both Johnson and Nick Sirianni after the game, just showing you what it means to big number 74.
What does that mean, though? They're really happy for you right now.
It's been a long time since I played ball, bro. I was like, after that touchdown with Saquon, I almost cried on the sideline. I ain't gonna lie, I got emotional.
When I was walking up the tunnel, I saw Fred, and it was only Fred and I in the tunnel, and just gave him a big hug. And man, I could see how happy he was just from the way he performed. He's worked hard at that. We talk about roles a lot. Those guys' role was to be ready to go if their number is called, and they sure were.
And it wasn't just Sirianni impressed. How about offensive coordinator Kellen Moore just raving about the two offensive linemen who might need to play yet again coming Sunday?
Those guys played phenomenal. I think this was a huge example of next man up game in many positions. Certainly with the offensive line, those guys did a phenomenal job. Fred, Tyler, like popping in there and just playing ball. And at times, you play these situations out, and you never know when your number's going to be called. And to hop in there and in Fred's case, maybe play right tackle where he's played left on the one rep he got in practice, and now he's on the right side. And those guys did a phenomenal job. That front was going to be a really challenging front for us, especially from a protection standpoint. They do a lot of movement, a lot of games. They create a lot of stress and challenges, and for those guys to communicate at that high of a level with that limited amount of exposure together was a really, really cool example of how much time and effort those guys put into the film room, all those different things, and it all adds up. And so those guys did a nice job.
Now, despite all these positives, my biggest concern remains Nick Sirianni and a seemingly lack of complete awareness on these fourth down decisions that really should, or at least could have, cost the Eagles the game on Sunday. And again, the Eagles did win, and so I guess we can't really blame Nick Sirianni, but eventually these calls, maybe they did last week versus the Falcons, will cost the Eagles, and they might cost Nick Sirianni his job. He just can't seem to get out of his own way. Like, something that's been a long-standing issue for Eagle fans with the fiery head coach is that he just seems to do dumb things at dumb times and cost his team. Right now, you have a great defensive coordinator. You have a great offensive coordinator. The weapons are there. The team is hungry to come together, unlike last season. Just stop trying to stand in the way of it and be the sole reason why the Birds win sometimes, but also the sole reason why the Birds lose sometimes. The problem is Sirianni was asked about this again yesterday and doubled down on, it was my decision, it was the right decision. Ugh, I just hate hearing this.
Every time we go for it on fourth down or set ourselves up to go for it on fourth down, I'm doing what I think is best for the football team at that particular time. So every time I do something like that, I'm doing it because I think it gives us the best chance to win the football game.
Now, also speaking of talking too much, how about athletes with podcasts? Again, one of the most annoying things happening in 2024, as we had Micah Parsons run his mouth yesterday, apparently calling out C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
The Saints are a very good team. And C.J. Gardner-Johnson said they're pretenders. They ain't no contenders, they're pretenders. And they have Derek Carr, remember that. I don't know who C.J. Gardner think he is, bro. I mean, we've been dealing with this cat for a while. I mean, we just got to be a little bit real right here. Like, I think Derek Carr has validated himself way before CJ has ever done. Like, in a most respectful way, I'm not taking away anything, but Derek Carr has been a Pro Bowl quarterback, before, highest paid quarterback before. Like, let's be real. Like, Derek Carr has always been a pretty damn quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're a contending team.
Not sure why Micah cares what Gardner-Johnson said about Derek Carr, because last time I checked, Gardner-Johnson's Eagles, of course, held Carr to just 12 points on Sunday, whereas Micah's Cowboys gave up, wait for it, 44 to Derek Carr and company just a week prior. Oh, and they also got maxed by Lamar and Derrick Henry on Sunday, so thumbs up for fun times in Big D. It's always fun after a Cowboys loss to watch the talking heads go, it's just crazy the Cowboys are not committed to winning a Super Bowl. They should have signed Derrick Henry. Like, we haven't heard this for, the past 10, 20 years in Dallas. They don't seem that committed. I just love watching the Cowboys struggle this much early on, and their schedule, it's not getting much easier. Now, of course, our schedule the next couple of weeks, it's going to be packed full of Eagles news as Philadelphia gets ready for a very interesting pre-bye week game game against the Bucs, who looked terrible versus the Broncos last week. I'm going to be very curious to see what kind of version of the Bucs you get on Sunday. But the injury updates are going to be followed very closely here. Be sure to subscribe. I'm Thomas Mott, hanging out here on a Tuesday. This has been the Thomas Mott Show.